Namaste everyone. My name is Vaishali Shah. I welcome each one of you to our session on Hindu culture and lifestyle. You're watching us live on hinduscriptures.com Facebook page. So as promised, we have another very interesting speaker, researcher who's going to talk to us about various aspects of Buddhism and Buddha's teachings. So before we start, let's do a small prayer. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mr. Wim, I welcome you. Namaste. How are you?
Uh,
Welcome to our session.
yes, I'm very well, very good. Of course, it took a little while for us to get online, but now we are here. So I just tell you how I'm setting up, how I'm set up. I
Yeah.
see you on my mobile phone, and I got my
Yeah.
laptop, and I got it so that I can actually watch my laptop, and then we take it from there. So
Yeah, Mr. Wim, before we start, I would like to read out your small introduction to our audience because I'm sure they would
right.
like to know something more. So, Mr. Wim Bomsom, Wim Bombom, how do you spell
Okay,
Bosboom?
Wim. Yeah, it's difficult. Wim
It's
Borsboom.
Bos
Borsboom. Yeah.
Bosboom. Okay. Bosboom grew up in Netherlands in a typical Roman Catholic environment, but from age of 6 on he became interestingly interested in Hinduism, Buddhism, and in Eastern archaeology and languages. Since his retirement from a variety of teaching occupations, teacher and teacher trainer at the Montessori Academy, Microsoft manual writer, software instructor, and docent at various universities. He returned to what he loved most in early life: Eastern religion and culture, archaeology, and linguistics. Over the last decade, he has been focusing his research specifically on the origins of Western alphabet, the ancient Harappan civilization and its seals, ancient migrations from the northwest India's Sapta Sindhava Delta, the Saraswati or Indus Valley. He published three well received studies: Reverse Engineering the Western Alphabets, about the origins of the Western alphabets, how its letter sequence was modeled after an ancient pre Ashokan Brahmi alphabet. Worldwide, Holocene seafaring, coast hugging, and land crossing migrations from the Indus Valley. How, over a period of 85,000 and 3,500 years ago, ancient Sanskrit became around the entire globe, becoming the seed language from which all Indo European languages, as well as many Pacific Ocean archipelago tongues originated. I'm sorry, I'm reading his introduction a little weirdly. Skanda, an ancient god rediscovered, the interpretation, decipherment, and translation of a dozen Harappan culture and Indus Valley culture seals. So these are his research and his a little bit about what he has been doing. But of course, we would like to know something from him more in details that how did he, he started and why he got interested in, India's various kind of cultures and sub sect, because I don't consider Jainism, Buddhism separate from main Vedic thing. They are part of the same family religion. So, what do you think about it? Now, please tell us something about yourself. Your early life. How did you start?
Yeah, so in the first place, of course, I'm very grateful that you invited me. Let me just, can you actually see my screen now? Can you see the picture? Or do you see me? I cannot hear you now.
Yes, I can see your face, but I cannot see your screen.
Okay, so how can I do that? So how's that? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen now. Yeah.
Is it pretty good or?
No, it's okay. But are you trying to show the library or the screen of the laptop?
Yeah.
The library is visible, not the laptop. I think you may just start with your self first, and then we will see. Don't turn. This is the. This is. No, don't change the. Yeah, this is okay.
Oh, okay, we'll leave it like this then.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, come on,
Well, that should be good. Well, so yeah, so I'm originally from Holland, and my name is Wim Borsboom, and of course that's Dutch. And although I'm originally from Holland, from Delft, a town that was actually a long time ago very much connected with India, but in not a good manner because it was all uh, colonial and had to do with the East India Company. I live in Victoria on Vancouver Island in Canada, and I've been here since 1971. I grew up in the Netherlands in a typically Roman Catholic environment, but at about age 6 on, I became very much interested in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Eastern archaeology and languages. I started very early, actually at about 10 or 11 years old, that I became interested in Buddhism and Hinduism. So since I retired, I've been doing all kinds of things, but lately I've been picking up on my old hobbies again. So I've been focusing especially on the Western alphabet, the origins in India, and I've been writing on the Indus Valley seals, and also I've been writing a paper on migrations. So yeah, what else can I tell you? I'm 76 years old, but I'm getting younger as I get older. I'm in very good health. I go for walks and hikes every day, so I should be around for another 26 years. Okay,
That sounds interesting. That's really
yeah,
wonderful, and I really appreciate your zeal to live. Because that is very important. We must have zeal to live longer, healthier, and happier. So
yeah.
then, which was the first book did you read? As in, how did you? What was the first? The interaction or encounter with Indian philosophies.
Well, actually, when I was 12 years old, I got a book about Bali in Indonesia. And when I, as a young kid, looked through that book, I knew very little about India, but quite a bit about Indonesia. And Indonesia in those days, of course, when I was 12, it was still mainly Hindu rather than what it's now, Islam. Anyway, when I looked through that book, and it was about Bali, I got really struck by a photograph of a pyre, a funeral pyre. And I wondered, what are they doing in Bali? They actually are burning people after they died. I'd never heard of it. Anyway, I kept looking through that book, and it was just amazing how it actually touched me. I come from Delft, and in Delft, the town in Holland, we have a museum that was totally devoted to the East, to Indonesia and India. And I used to go there with my father to visit pretty well every week. And at that museum, they had Hindu music, they had performers, and there were talks. And so by the time I was 17 or 18, I actually already started reading the Bhagavad Gita and some of the Upanishads. Of course, I never understood too much of it. I was still too young, but at least that is how I got into it. Then about 20 years ago, a friend of mine, I had to do some work in the United States, and a friend of mine from Connecticut, and she's from India. Uh, she invited me over, and at that point, she asked me if I could go with her to India and visit there. So about uh, 15 years ago, then 10 years ago, over the last 5 years, I've been in India 4 times for lectures, for some digging, to visit some ashrams of gurus that I felt very much in touch with. So yeah, that's about how I got into the India thing. Okay.
What was your first impression? As in, usually India, when a foreigner or a European comes to India, they have a very weird definition about India, about the cleanliness and the people and the way it is vibrant. They find it too busy. They A lot of people think that it is too much, but because maybe
Yeah,
they cannot
yeah,
digest that much. So,
yeah.
what was your impression? The When
Well,
you saw it physically, that's I would like to know.
yeah, yeah. The first time I went to India seriously was I was invited by a uh, cardiologist, a doctor, and she didn't do any operations on people, but she actually did meditation, and she had special physical techniques to help people to grow, let's say, more veins around their heart, so that they didn't have to have heart operation. Anyway, she was very much interested in chakras, auras, and chakras, and I was in those days teaching that. And so at that time, I met quite a few rather rich people, and because I take a few risks, I also went on long walks into that was in Mumbai, and got lost quite a few times, but always got back home. And to me, India it's a complex country, but I'm used to so many things. I'm used to heat. I'm used to cold. I'm used to pain. I'm used to all kinds of terrible things that most people cannot handle. So for me, India was very good. Uh, if you meet the Buddha, meet him in the street, meet him on the road, right? So when I go through India, I consider myself almost like the Buddha, right? Who's looking around and sees people and wonders how come people are suffering, wonders why some people are living this way and other people are living the other way. That then got me very much interested in investigating what the cause of suffering was. And lo and behold, I'm not the only one who did that, because the Buddha was one of the first ones who wanted to figure out what the cause of suffering was. So I started a website, and the website was about Kundalini and about auras and chakras. And uh, I would think I've got about 60,000 people who actually went to my website and to my blogs. And so I have many, many people in India. Uh, Whenever I go to India, I don't take precautions. Whenever I come back home, though, I'm always terribly sick. It takes about 3 or 4 weeks to recuperate, but that's all right because I had just the most intense experiences. So for me, it's no problem. For other people, when they ask me, how shall I go to India? I tell them, you know what, go with a tour, right? Because if you try to do it on your own, that's almost impossible, right? So, uh, and yeah, my experiences are very good. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you start, researching about Buddha's studies, especially his teachings, his this eightfold messages? So how did you
Mm,
start? What have you learned
yeah.
in?
Well, of course, I started out the very first kind of serious things was I learned Sanskrit. I read the Bhagavad Gita. Lately, I forgot how a lot. That's quite a while ago that I knew Sanskrit. Something happened to my brain. So at some point, I forgot everything I learned about Sanskrit. And now I pretty well every day have to learn it again. I can read the letters and I can understand the words quite well. But I started with the Bhagavad Gita. Um, how I got into the Buddha type of thing, well, that is all general interest and it comes to you, and I started investigating it. Uh, what I found most important for me was I don't consider myself, in a sense, a student. In that sense, I'm not a person who goes to somebody who teaches me and that I then have to learn how to understand things. I go and investigate for myself. And what I do, because I was very much interested in finding out why people suffered, then I found out that I needed to get into that myself. So I started to do a lot of writing, a lot of talking with people, and I found various methods that I found were very much the same as the Buddha. Uh, then, of course, I noticed that many people were talking about uh, the triple gem or the three refuges and the Eightfold Path. But what I noticed was with people, they read it, they hear it, but for them it's knowledge. And I found that when the Buddha was actually starting his kind of teaching after he gave up going with the sadhaks, after he gave up going the old-fashioned way, and he didn't want to get into tantra, so he got into what you call the middle way. And the middle way was totally different. It was not kind of doing great sacrifices. It was not doing tantric work. It was trying to find out some middle way. Now, when I started reading him, I noticed that I understood what he said in a different manner than others. When people say the Buddha said life is suffering, I thought, no, that's not what he meant. He meant the way people live is suffering. Life is not suffering. When the Buddha said life is illusion, no, that's not what he said. What he meant was the way people live, they live in illusion. What is illusion? What is that illusion that brings suffering? That illusion is brought about by manipulation, by other people who try to succumb, who try to overcome other people, and who try to actually use their students more or less like victims. And instead of teaching them how to find out for themselves who they are, what they uh, they rather have them listen to the gurus and then copycat them. Now, the Buddha was not into getting followers that he thought they should copycat him. So what he did, he wanted to make sure that people on their own, by themselves, would find out what he had discovered also.
That is very interesting. But then, what is your discovery? What is your research in his in his messages? What are your deeper thoughts? What have you written so far? I would like to know something more. I think you wanted to show us some presentation. Will
Yeah,
you be able to do it? Or maybe you can just read through your presentation, and we would
yeah,
like to.
but yeah. So what I'd like to talk about is how are the Buddha's triple gem, like the three refuges and the Eightfold Path, how are they related? They actually belong together. Now, why is that? Because people normally think they're separate. I also like to talk about what the Buddha's intent was with his approach towards liberation, mukti. from suffering, dukkha, and to liberate the soul from illusion. Then I want to talk about how we can apply his advice in our lives, but not the way we go to ashrams, not the way we go to teachers, but how can we do that all by ourselves? So, what was the Buddha's intent with his approach towards liberation from suffering and illusion? So, how are those two things interrelated? So, it's important that we also actually and factually realize the full reality of Buddha nature, that we recover our full potential, that we ourselves actually recover our Buddha nature, the way we are, our unadulterated, even if hidden, but our unadulterated self, which is present in all human beings. So, a few things that are true. So, we know about the Four Noble Truths. So, the Four Noble Truths, well, they don't sound so noble, and whether they are truth, we don't know. But there are four things we are sure about. The first thing we know is pretty well everybody suffers. So, suffering, that's a characteristic of life as generally lived by people. And it has been normalized as though it is real life. But it's not real life, it's actually elusive life, life that we live under manipulations, but we treat that illusion as more real than reality. So it's so funny that when they live in a world with nature, okay, nature you don't argue with. Nature is what it is. But as soon as they deal with people, then they lose that nature and they become denatured. And instead of being like in conditions like in nature, where nothing is conditional, in human nature, everything is conditional. It is people live by conditions, they are manipulated. If you do this, then you get a cookie. If you don't do this, then you get punished. That type of thing. Now, that whole activity, that whole manipulation of what if, and if you do the right thing, it's good, and if you do the bad thing, it's bad, that is that kind of life of illusion that people deal with as though it's more real than reality. Of course, that's why we meditate, in order to stop those manipulations, in order to stop being manipulated, in order to stop the things that we have been made to believe. So we try to meditate and empty our brains, empty our mind, and clean up our actions so that everything that we became because of how we were made to live, how we were caused to live, how we were, in a manner of speaking, enslaved, so that will go. So then the question is, well, why do we suffer? So what is the origin of suffering? Like, it's brought about, of course, by what we call cravings, thirst, desires, attachments that bind us. We are manipulated by them. There's a wonderful word called Trishna. And actually, the word thirst, so when you're thirsty, you might actually get a desire or a craving for drink. Now, that kind of thirst for things, the desire for things, first had to do with Trishna or Thrishna, which was kind of the desire to get liquids into yourself. But then slowly that word Trishna started to mean desires, attachments, they bind us. Now, next thing, so I'm still talking about those Four Noble Truths. So the first one is we do suffer. The second one is samudaya, why do we suffer? And then the third part of those Four Noble Truths is nirodha, which actually means, can we free ourselves from suffering? Can we make that suffering go away so that it becomes nothing? The word nirvana, near or nice actually means that it gets blown away, that it gets dissolved, that it gets evaporated. So can we free ourselves from suffering? Then, well, yes, we can. So the Buddha came with this grand idea. Well, I'll show you 8 ways to do that. And those 8 ways, those 8 manners, they actually, over time, they were pulled together, and that then became the Eightfold Path. So that is there 8 ways to help us to free ours from those cravings, from those desires, from those attachments, from that artificial living, from that slavery under which we live. And thus, we can then create a cessation, that stopping of suffering, which then gets us into mukti, and we might actually become liberated. So there's basically the whole idea of uh, the 4 noble truths. So then we get to that Eightfold Path. So what's it for? Well, the Eightfold Path mainly, it was meant to restore our original authentic self, the original authentic self that everybody has. We may have lost it from the moment we were born, but we still have it. We haven't really lost it, but we seemingly lost it. It went into kind of hiding. It went into a safe place. We never lost it. We can always get it back. So what the guru does, the guru tries to tell you, tries to guide you into finding that self. How can you find it? By getting rid of your pseudo self, by getting rid of that elusive self. So the second part then of the most part for the Eightfold Path is to restore harmony and unity at all levels and all aspects of human beings' personal, social, and universal existence. So that is what the Eightfold Path is totally about. So each of those 8 things, they are actually quite radical urgings in which the Buddha prompts us to accept a way of well-being and living that is altogether different from the way that most of us have become accustomed to. And he points to an existential and essential authentic way of being and living that is quite radically holistic from the let go. So he wants us to get as quickly as possible to that whole self, that whole self. So it's not like the Eightfold Path is you first do this, you then do that, you then do that, and it takes you so many years. It is possible to actually, by taking those steps more or less all at once, by living them, that original self can be reclaimed. So it's a way of being that is uniquely primed into each human being, that original way that is uniquely seeded as it were into everybody at the moment of our birth, but we lost it. So the Eightfold Path has 8 very specific words that we need to concentrate on. The first thing is insight. Insight means to investigate life. What is it? What is it actually what we are doing? Not just take it for granted, but figuring it out inside. Can I find out deeper what life is about? Then we have to have an intent, the a wish, not a desire out of greed, but a wish to become ourselves, to become again who we were. So that's our intent. Then we need to make sure that when we start speaking, when we start communicating with others, that the third part of those 8 of that Eightfold Path is that our expression, our vocal expression, our physical expression actually represents who we are, who we really are inside, not who we were made to be, not who we think other people want us to be. Then the fourth part of those 8 urges, those 8 ideas is to have your action to come from your inner self and not having it pushed and pulled about by other people that cause you to act. Action has to come from our inside, almost spontaneously, like a child does. A child doesn't have to learn to walk. A child does not have to learn to sing. It doesn't have to learn to speak. It comes from itself, and by mimicking in a while speaking, and by letting the things that come from itself come to the surface, and by looking at other people to actually uh, copy that action and make sure that that action is pure and good and not the way other people want that to be. So our lifestyle has to actually be, which is the fifth part of those eight urges. Lifestyle has to be exemplifying that. Uh, we need a lot of effort to do that. So there has to be a very strong will to do it, almost a survival thing. Because if we live in the other world, that pseudo world, we might as well be dead. We seem to be living, but we are not. We are just following rules, living according to laws, doing what other people want us to do. We seem alive, but actually our real self needs to survive so that the unreal self, that pseudo self, dies in us, right? So we have to have that effort to reclaim our own selves. It's important that we focus. So concentration is important. Not that we go all over the place and do everything we want to do. We need to really concentrate on things. We need to be mindful of that. So 8 things: insight, pure intent, pure vocal expression, physical expression, good action, a lifestyle that's good, effort, doing what you need to do, concentrate on your goals, and be mindful about everything you do. Now, so altogether, those are part of the wheel of life. And as we know, the wheel of life has 8 spokes, and each of those spokes, one is inside the top one, then at, let's say, so there is 8 around. So imagine, I'm not sure if you can see that. See if you can see that. No, I don't think so. Is that visible? No, that's
Very clearly, not very clearly.
no. Okay, so let me explain. So imagine a wheel with 8 spokes. Now, when you see that wheel of life, then actually when you check it out, in the center of it is actually a tiny kind of a yin yang shaped thing. But the yin yang shape, the yin yang is of course 2, right? But there is a round shape within it that's actually a triune type of thing. So it's almost like yin yang, but in 3 parts, right? That is actually the triple gem, right? So the triple gem is actually that kind of, uh, which actually means Buddha, Dharma, uh, let me just here. So Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Buddha is that you find your real self, the enlightened person that you are physically, that you go after truth, which is Dharma, that you don't follow the law of the letter, but that you follow the truth that comes from within, and that you then live together with others in a community, Sangha, right? So this triune thing is like a crystal. Think about uh, a crystal. Yeah, it's really hard. Let's see if we can. It's no, it's not showing too well. Like a tetrahedron, and the tetrahedron has 3 sides at the bottom. Now, that crystal. So the bottom is who we're going to be, the Jivan Mukti. One side is Sangha, the other side is Dharma, and the other side is Buddha. So that's the idea of what we call the triple gem. It's a gem, right? Which actually is within us and has to come from us. So the Buddha part is to gain crystal clear insight into our original nature, the nature of the individual human, in our own uniqueness. Humankind is a species in its unconditional perfection, the all-encompassing universe from its smallest dimensions to its largest, the intrinsic and essential divinity of all. That is Buddha. So Buddha is not the person Buddha, but is the enlightenment, seeing the light, seeing the clarity of clear insight into our original nature, to see humankind as living as a species in an unconditional perfection, all encompassing uh, from the smallest to the largest, so that we may actually within ourselves discover that essential divinity that we've got all inside us. Dharma is, of course, to apply that insight unconditionally according to the universal laws of spiritual and physical nature. And Sangha, so Sangha is the togetherness, which you don't have to be in a monastery, so to say, but that can be in a normal family, it can be at school, anywhere where you are with other people. That is Sangha, that's community. It doesn't have to be special. In fact, the more normal it is, and if in a normal environment you can live this way, that would be the best Sangha, one that is totally integrated within the world, that might have lost its senses. Right. So in that Sangha, that the idea is to apply and realize our clear insight and the universal law in the physical and social reality of our own personal body and our social community. Each one of us each one being an essential tool in the realization. Realization, by the way, means making real, to actually and factually realize your enlightenment. So when people say, oh, that person is enlightened, well, that might very well be true. But if that enlightened person actually does not realize his enlightenment, does not live it, does not make it real in life, then the person might be enlightened, but he might not be realized. When you realize, you actually and factually live it physically. Right? So the Buddha, he advises us to use these tools appropriately, effectively, and with integrity, the right way. There is actually a word, so usually about these eight things in the Eightfold Path, they're called right speaking, right touch, right perfection, mindfulness, right, uh, all the things right. Now, what does that word right actually mean? The word right actually, the word that he used was samyang. It's a Sanskrit word that traditionally gets translated as right, in, for example, right view, right action, right speed. But it's more than that. It's not only right, it's complete. It's not right because it's morally right. No, it has to be right from the inside of ourselves. Let's see. Yeah, so that's pretty well. I wish I could have done the presentation, the way I actually prepared it. Now it's kind of all kind of a little bit wishy-washy, but I think I said enough of the way I look at these things.
No, but you have raised quite a few questions in my mind because
Yeah, okay.
when you said that Buddha's certain words are misinterpreted, so do you understand the shortcomings of English language because they are misinterpreted in English language? Because
Yeah.
when I studied Buddha's teaching, I studied in Hindi first of all, and then I studied in English, and I found tremendous difference because I think that essence was just not coming out in English. So, what do you think? How much knowing Sanskrit is important, and what do you think about how we can, implement these teachings into our lives?
Well, in the first place, I think there's a really good a movement in the in India now for people to start actually learning and reading Sanskrit, to not read the translations of the Bhagavad Gita and of the Upanishads and of all those things, but to actually learn it. Uh, there are quite a few excellent teachers. I myself visited a teacher in Oroville and at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Sampadananda Mishra, I think is his name. And
Your sound is not very clear. Your sound is disturbed. Your audio is disturbed a bit.
just lately or so, or
Now it's okay. Now is okay.
yeah. So there are quite a few now extremely good teachers in schools that actually teach that are intent on having young people to learn Sanskrit, the original Sanskrit. And there are actually a lot of videos now made for children that take old Hindu stories, and those stories are being told actually in Sanskrit as subtitles. They actually also have subtitles of these stories. So, like these are, I forget the name now of that company. It's also in Oroville. It's book. Yeah, I forget it. I wish I would have known that question was coming up, but there are actually children's stories now. So it is important that we start with our children, right? So they probably have it much easier than we, when we are older, to learn Sanskrit, especially when we start with these kind of comic books, with these films that tell the stories, with subtitling and so on.
Okay, but then what do you think about because there are many scriptures of Buddhism are written in Pali. So have you tried to learn anything in Pali? And what do you think
Yeah,
about difference between
uh,
Pali and
I think, well, okay, to me, when I read Pali, uh, I very quickly see for all the words that the words actually are kind of uh, like when you say dharma, they say dhamma, right?
Mm.
So the words are not, it's almost like it's a dialect of Sanskrit. So my idea is actually that it would be better for people to read in Sanskrit, because Sanskrit also, the words by themselves, the letters that it uses, still have the original vibrations of the earliest words, the earliest Devanagari alphabet. Those sounds, those vibrations are not as available in Pali, right? Because it's more like a dialect. It is less articulated. Well, in Sanskrit, the articulation is so extremely good. The vowels are so good. So the vibrations of the meaning of the words come through stronger. So I think that is actually uh, quite important. Now, traditionally, of course, through because of the way Buddha's teachings came to us, it came through us through Pali, and actually also in Chinese, because much of it was translated in Chinese. But the Chinese translations are actually closer to the understanding of Sanskrit than the translation of Pali. So I found it amazing that, uh, let's say, in Chinese, that the Chinese years ago took quite a liking to Buddhism. That's why Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, why those people became so important, Kuan Yin and all that. So I think even people who read the scriptures in Sanskrit or in Chinese, Chinese is not too bad. But of course, hey, that's even harder for us to learn.
okay. So what do you think about when I mean A lot of people think Buddha as the avatar of Vishnu, and there is another theory which says it is not true. So have you come across anything on this line that do Buddha is what, a ninth avatar of Vishnu? What do you think? Do you think he's
Okay, I think in terms of lineage, I think when a person finds his real self, lives his real self, realizes his enlightenment, from that moment on, such a person becomes part of an age old lineage that started about the way I figured it out about 13,000 years ago. 13,000 years ago, when humankind transitioned from hunter gathering society to agricultural society, at some point that was such an enormous change and quite calamities took over that in those days, 13,000 years ago, there was one particular man, and that one became the wizard of his tribe. In that same tribe was also a chief. Now, this man and the chief, they had totally different ideas. The chief became somebody who wanted people to be his servants, his slaves, his soldiers, while the wise man wanted the people to become uh, self-knowledgeable, to take care of themselves, not to have serve others, but to be a servant towards themselves and to be a servant to others, but in a way that they would also help others to become whole again. Now, that very first person, uh, I actually equate that person with Adam from the Old Testament, I've written a story about it. I've seen how that happened in visions, and I've seen how that one particular person, how he became the model for many other people after him. So yes, there are these avatars. Christ is one of them. Vishnu is one of them. And there's a whole lot of these people, but it is a lineage. Uh, I don't think we have to especially pick out this or that or the other person, right? Because we've got it within ourselves, right? So, yes, are they reincarnations? No. What is reincarnation? Well, that's a totally different kind of topic, of course. We think if we live good and well, we're going to get the next good life. If we live bad, we're going to be punished by our next life to be bad. That is actually all conditional. That type of moral thinking, that kind of moral religious life does not create enlightenment. It does not. It makes us go do things in order. Well, it is actually manipulation. So the idea of rebirth, to be reborn as a next better person, or to not be reborn and go back to a bad life, that comes from a religious kind of approach, which tries to force their followers by following certain laws and prescriptions to become what their leader thinks they should be. Well, that is all conditioning. I've been to many ashrams, and of course, many ashrams are begin well. They begin extremely well, but after a while, they get so many followers, and then the many followers they become followers, and they never got to a point where they are actually realizers, where they actually become what they are supposed to be.
so I was just going through the comments. Someone has asked that what kind of books do you recommend um, to read about Buddhism? As in, which are the best book you have found so far?
No, I have no answer on that.
Why?
My answer is we need to read up on that Eightfold Path. We need to follow that path. We need to actually investigate those 8 points. And we don't have to read the books of others. We have to read the books of our lives. We have to read other people. We have to understand them. We have to understand where they're coming from and where they're going to. So uh, we can read in books, and and that's all great, but book learning is book learning is book learning. At some point, you can read any book, but put the books aside and start applying what you might have read. But then you find, if you read the right books, then, and with insight, and you read those books, then you find out, oh, but what I'm reading, I know that already. If a book doesn't tell you what you already know, then it's useless to have the book. Right? If a book is written in such a way that it guides you towards finding out what you actually intrinsically already know, it puts you on the right way. That those are the kind of books that we need. Those are also the kind of teachers that we need. Not teachers that tell us what to do, but teachers that tell us how to find out for yourself. So people can say, what books should I read? Which guru should I go to? Should I go to this or that ashram? It's not important. It's not important at all. What's important is you are your own guru, right? We have it, everything within ourselves. Come to rest, become quiet, start listening to yourself, not listening to your ego voice, but listening to the silence that you've got. Start start stopping start stopping believing your thoughts. Thoughts are words. Every word is based on a thing. Any word comes from outside. Nobody is nobody's born with words, but we've been born with insight. But words we learn from the outside. So whenever we have thoughts, whatever thought we have, they're always secondary because they're based on words that we learned from other people. So many of the words that bother us when we are meditating, let's say you're trying to meditate, and all of a sudden words come up, ideas come up, and all that, right? Then we say, oh, we got to quiet them, right? Well, replace all those words with nothing. Instead of using those words, instead of believing them, instead of even hating them, we should just listen to them. And then somebody asked me at some point, well, what do you do if I'm meditating and all of a sudden I need to light a candle and I get a matchstick and I light the matchstick and I want to light the candle? Is that a good thing? I told him, you know what? What is a matchstick? Start thinking about what it is. What is a match? What is it? Then suddenly start realizing that a matchstick is made from wood, from a tree that has roots, from a tree that has leaves, from a tree that gets sunlight, from a tree that gets water from the earth. So when you look at the matchstick and you do well enough and you go really into it, you start seeing that that matchstick, which is just a word, that actually it represents something greater, something grander. Then you think about the roots, right? That the tree grew from, and then you think, where from? It came from the earth. Then you start thinking about the earth. You think, what is that earth? Then you think, well, the earth is part of our solar system. Wow, that's great. What is the solar system? And before we know the solar system, it is the universe. So here, when you just meditate on a matchstick and you go into it from one thought to another, and you widen your scope, you open up, you go from the littlest thing to the grander, to the grander, to the grander, right? So when you think about that matchstick, that it actually lights your piece of your candle or your incense. Well, what is that? What is that smoke that is coming? Where it's coming from? What is that? What is that burnt wood? What is all that? What is light? What is that light that comes from the match? Well, light is photons. What are photons? They come from the sun. Where's the sun? It's the center of of our galaxy. And again, you see that our galaxy can then point us out the way into the universe. So we can think from the tiniest thing, and then we meditate upon that, and we widen and widen, and before we know, you go deeper and deeper, and then you come to a point where you say, but where did it all come from? Where did it ever start? And then you find out probably it never started. The basic idea has always been there, and that is the soul, the eternal soul, which is in everything. So every particle, every piece of wood, every spoon, everything you use in the house, everything is a guide towards widening your scope, finding out what it is, and you see it's all created by people that were inventors. How did they get those inventions? They got them through inspiration. Where do they get the inspiration from? It comes from their own vitality. Where does that vitality come from? It comes from the spark of life. Where does the spark of life come from? It comes from the universe. It comes from our divine spark, the innermost spark. Is my spark the same as yours? Yes, it is. And when you take all those sparks together, that is what you could call the enlightened being, the God. Right? So,
Lovely. Wim, I'm very impressed by your clarity on this, Buddha's teachings, because not many people can actually bring out the best of what he has written and what he meant. So tell me one last question and the last message you would like to share with our audience, that if they want to follow the path of Buddhas, what actions they need to take physically, emotionally, but you have to give us like good pointers, like this is what you should do if you want to follow the path of Buddhas.
okay, first, drink water.
Okay.
Second, breathe. Third, go out and be in the sunshine. Do all the things that we do to a plant. When you want to grow a tulip, what do you do with the tulip? You put it in soil. You give it water, you give it warmth, you give it light, you give it oxygen, you give it good food. So that's what we need to do. What are the main things that we do? Well, breathing, which is part of meditation, right? Breathing, you do that, but also drinking water. I noticed many people are so dehydrated, right? And when you're dehydrated, you become anxious because dehydration, you get very close to being like in the desert, and your survival skills are going down and anxiety comes up. So we need to drink pure water. That is important, just like what you do with a plant. Just like that. We need to have pure food. Now we can talk about what is pure food. Food is fruits and vegetables. And you know what? There's nothing wrong, basically, with meat. In a manner of speaking, there's lots of schools that do this, that do that. I studied the Indus Valley civilization, and so between 8,500 and 3,300 years ago in India, Indian people in the Indus Valley, they actually were also meat eaters. Well, not overly done, just all just, whatever was good. But I think the most important thing is fruits and vegetables. Fruit, every fruit has the cleanest water. It's even cleaner than water from a purifier, right? Because the fruit juices, they are purified. They are, how shall I say? They're filtered. They're filtered by the roots, and they come into the fruit. And when you take that in, then not only do you get, the taste, but you also get a vibration of that fruit. Same with vegetables. So uh, get get your get your sustenance from that. So now Go out for walks. Walk. Uh, Walking, not to look around, but walking like go out in nature. One person asked me a couple of weeks ago, what should I do to find myself? I asked him, where do you live? In the city. Where were you the happiest? Well, I was the happiest when I was a little kid. Where was that? In a village somewhere. Where? 70 miles north from Mumbai. Did you ever go back? No. Would you like to? Was it your happiest time? Would you like to catch up with who you were then? So go out in nature. Go to the place where you feel most at one with nature, where you as a child felt most comfortable, where you could play in the mud, where you could find any kind of thing to play with. That could be sticks, there could be little animals, there could be bones, whatever, rocks, and just do that. So go out in nature. So water, sunshine, oxygen. Put your feet on the ground, walk, look around, be healthy. Right? So yes, 15 minutes of doing hard work, working up a sweat, and after the sweat, do take a shower, that type of thing. And then if you have a dry skin, use olive oil. In India, that's not a problem. You have the best oil. So, you know, I'm all in favor of going back to nature, the way we were supposed to be when we were a little baby. But then when we were a baby, we were taken away from nature, out of nature. We were not supposed to get our hands dirty. We were supposed to get clean clothes. We were not supposed to do this and that and the other thing. We were not supposed to get lost. Well, a child does not get lost that well, right?
That is
That
true.
easily. So go back to your childhood nature because a child is closest to Buddha nature than anybody ever after, right?
Very interesting. So,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this session, and I'm so happy that you have brought out the best pearls of wisdom from Buddha's teachings. So, I'm sure our audience will also get to learn a lot from you. Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us, talking to our audience, and coming on our page. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I'm gonna do, I'm actually going to take the presentation that I set up, and I'm going to actually turn it into a proper presentation, and then
Yeah,
I will put it on the internet, and then
yeah,
I will be able to go much deeper into those things, right?
yeah.
And then
Share the link
I'll
with
send it
us.
to you, right?
Yes.
And I've done quite a few of those things, and I really want to make something really nice of this. So count on it. That will be coming your way. I thank you very much for having invited me. It turned
Thank
out
you.
different than what I thought, but such is life. And with life, we adapt and we play. Playing is so important. Play
Thank
with your baby, play with the baby inside, play with the Buddha inside. By the
thank you. Thank you.
way,
Thank you.
and
I'll see
Namaskar and
you.
Dhanyavad.
Dhanyawad.